Hello, everybody! You know what I like? Reading. Reading is great. One of the great things about reading is that you can use your imagination and picture whatever you want to picture in your head. The speech I'm going to give is about a man who liked reading and learning about new things. Now, some of you might think I'm talking about Abraham Lincoln. Well, no, it's not about him. The speech I'm giving, my speech is about the Western author Lewis L'Amour. Today we will talk about three things: his life as an author, his life as a child, his life as an author, and his later years. Allow me to go back to the beginning. Lewis L'Amour was born in 1908 to a family of 7 children. He was born in Jamestown, North Dakota. A lot of people, including me, call his last name L'Amour, but really that's a pen name. His real name is actually L'Amour. His father was a veterinarian, and his mother was a school teacher. He learned a lot about the Civil War and the Indian Wars from his grandfather, because he fought in those wars. During his time in Jamestown, L'Amour spent most of his time at the library. But he didn't spend all of his childhood in Jamestown. You see, at one point in time, his family had some financial problems, and so they packed everything up and traveled across the country for 7 years. During those 7 years, L'Amour did a lot of stuff, like skin cattle. And he also met a lot of people. And some of those people inspired him to become a writer. After those 7 years, he and his family returned back to Jamestown. When he was 15, L'Amour dropped out of school so he could travel across the American West and around the world. During those years, he had some odd jobs. Like, one of those odd jobs was being a lumberjack. After traveling around the world and exploring the great frontier, L'Amour traveled back to Jamestown and decided to become a writer. Like I said before, after his travels, L'Amour returned to Jamestown, North Dakota, and decided to become a writer. He decided to write poetry, but the problem is poetry during that time was not really popular. So he ended up writing short stories. His first short story that was popular was Anything for a Pal. This short story was picked up by the Pulp magazine company, Pulp Fiction magazine, and it made Lewis L'Amour famous. After that, he started writing more short stories, and also during that time he was still writing poetry. But in 1942, he had to step away from the typewriter because he got drafted. After he was done serving his country, he went back to being a writer. But the only problem was that the editors and publishers only accepted 2 stories: Westerns or mysteries. And so he chose Westerns. He never intended to be a Western writer, but he just became that. During the late 40s and early 50s, he had a hard time trying to sell his stories. But things were looking bright when he sold one of his first novels, Hondo. Hondo was a very was very successful, and it made Lamore famous. He was such a big hit, they made it into a movie starring John Wayne. And no, it did not star John Wayne Gacy. It starred the cowboy John Wayne. Anyway, after Hondo, Lamore wrote more stories that people liked, which leads me to his later years. In the 80s, Lamore received some many awards. In 1983, he received the Congressional Gold Medal Award by Congress. In 1984, he received the Freedom Award from Ronald Reagan. But in 1987, he learned he had some health problems. At first, he got sick, and he got better. Then a couple of months later, he got sick again. After a trip to the doctor, he learned that he had lung cancer. During his last days, he wrote his autobiography, Education of a Wandering Man. When he was finished writing it, he passed away. My speech I've just given is on Louis L'Amour. I have talked about his life as an author, his life as a child, and his life in his later years. He was born and raised in Jamestown, North Dakota. He wrote poetry. He traveled across the country for 7 years. He traveled across the American West and around the world when he was a teenager. And he has received the Freedom Award and the Congressional Gold Medal Award. I hope you have enjoyed my speech.